In the labyrinthine corridors of Florence's Palazzo Vecchio, where shadows danced with ambition and whispers carried the weight of empires, a profound truth emerged that would echo through the centuries. The world, in its infinite complexity and cruelty, does not reward the meek, the compliant, or those who surrender their agency to the comfortable illusions of moral absolutism. Instead, it bends to those who understand its fundamental nature and respond with calculated strength. This document explores the uncomfortable reality that weakness invites exploitation, compliance breeds stagnation, and mercy without strategic purpose becomes a tool of self-destruction. Drawing from the philosophical foundations laid by Niccolò Machiavelli in his revolutionary work The Prince, we examine how the pursuit of effectiveness often requires abandoning the comfortable myths that society uses to domesticate its citizens. The thesis presented here is not one of cruelty for its own sake, but rather a recognition that true strength, authentic leadership, and meaningful achievement require the courage to transcend conventional moral boundaries when circumstances demand it. This is the path of those who refuse to be victims of their own nobility, who understand that in a world governed by power dynamics, the choice is not between good and evil, but between effectiveness and irrelevance. Part 1, The Architecture of Weakness. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Renaissance Florence as merchants, nobles, and common citizens alike navigated the complex web of political allegiances that determined their survival. In this environment, a young diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli began to understand a fundamental truth about human nature that most preferred to ignore: the world actively seeks and exploits weakness in all its forms. Modern society has constructed elaborate mechanisms designed to identify, isolate, and neutralize strength wherever it emerges. These mechanisms operate under the guise of morality, fairness, and social harmony, but their true purpose is to ensure compliance with systems that benefit from human docility. The educational system teaches students to follow instructions rather than think critically. The corporate world rewards those who fit seamlessly into predetermined roles rather than those who challenge existing paradigms. Social media algorithms amplify voices that conform to acceptable narratives while suppressing those who dare to think independently. This systematic cultivation of weakness begins in childhood, where children are taught to seek approval rather than develop internal compass systems. They learn to value being liked over being respected, being safe over being strong, being comfortable over being capable. The result is a population of adults who instinctively defer to authority, who mistake compliance for virtue, and who have been conditioned to believe that their weakness is somehow noble. The consequences of this conditioning extend far beyond individual limitations. Weak individuals create weak families, weak communities, and weak nations. They become susceptible to manipulation by those who understand the psychology of power. They trade their autonomy for the illusion of security, their potential for the comfort of mediocrity, and their dignity for the approval of systems that view them as expendable resources. In the political realm, this weakness manifests as voters who consistently elect leaders who promise to solve their problems rather than empower them to solve their own. In the economic sphere, it creates workers who accept stagnant wages and diminishing benefits rather than develop the skills and leverage necessary to command better compensation. In personal relationships, it produces individuals who sacrifice their authentic selves to maintain connections with people who neither appreciate nor deserve their sacrifice. The world's appetite for weakness is insatiable because weakness is profitable. Weak consumers buy products they don't need to impress people they don't like. Weak citizens accept invasive surveillance and diminishing freedoms in exchange for promises of safety. Weak employees work longer hours for less compensation because they fear the consequences of demanding better treatment. Weak individuals seek validation through social media metrics rather than meaningful achievement. This exploitation of weakness operates through sophisticated psychological mechanisms that most people never recognize. Fear is weaponized to prevent risk-taking and innovation. Guilt is employed to discourage the pursuit of self-interest. Shame is utilized to punish those who refuse to conform. Hope is manipulated to maintain compliance even when systems consistently fail to deliver on their promises. The educational establishment plays a crucial role in perpetuating these dynamics by teaching students to value credentials over competence, conformity over creativity, and safety over strength. Students learn to regurgitate approved information rather than develop independent thinking capabilities. They are taught to work within systems rather than challenge or improve them. The result is a generation of graduates who are technically educated but fundamentally unprepared for a world that rewards innovation, risk-taking, and strategic thinking. Corporate environments reinforce these patterns by rewarding employees who follow procedures without question while punishing those who suggest improvements or challenge inefficient practices. Promotion often depends more on political acumen than actual competence, creating organizational structures that prioritize compliance over performance. The most successful individuals in these environments are often those who master the art of appearing busy while accomplishing little of substance. Media institutions contribute to this dynamic by consistently portraying strength as dangerous and compliance as virtuous. Heroes in popular culture are typically those who sacrifice themselves for others rather than those who build something meaningful. Success is often depicted as either the result of luck or morally questionable behavior, discouraging viewers from pursuing ambitious goals. The message is clear: remain small, remain safe, remain compliant. Religious institutions, while often providing valuable community and spiritual guidance, can also contribute to this pattern by emphasizing humility and self-sacrifice to the point where believers become afraid to pursue their potential or assert their legitimate interests. The concept of virtue becomes associated with weakness rather than strength, creating individuals who mistake passivity for righteousness. The psychological cost of this systematic weakening is profound. Individuals who have been conditioned to seek approval rather than respect often struggle with chronic anxiety, depression, and a sense of powerlessness. They feel disconnected from their authentic selves and uncertain about their ability to navigate challenges independently. Their relationships tend to be superficial because they have never learned to establish and maintain healthy boundaries. Perhaps most tragically, these individuals often pass their conditioning onto their children, perpetuating cycles of weakness and dependency that can persist across generations. They teach their children to prioritize safety over growth, approval over authenticity, and compliance over competence. The result is a society increasingly populated by individuals who lack the psychological resources necessary for innovation, leadership, and meaningful achievement. The recognition of these patterns represents the first step toward liberation from them. Understanding how weakness is cultivated and exploited allows individuals to begin the process of reclaiming their agency and developing the strength necessary to navigate an increasingly complex world. This process requires courage, because it involves abandoning comfortable illusions and confronting uncomfortable realities about both oneself and society. The path forward requires developing what Machiavelli understood as the fundamental prerequisite for effective action: the willingness to see the world as it actually is rather than as we wish it were. This clarity of vision becomes the foundation upon which genuine strength can be built. Part 2: The Mechanics of Transcendence. The transition from weakness to strength is not a gentle evolution but a revolutionary transformation that requires individuals to fundamentally restructure their relationship with power, morality, and social expectations. This process demands what Machiavelli recognized as essential for any leader seeking to create meaningful change: the courage to abandon ineffective strategies regardless of how morally comfortable they might feel. The first principle of transcendence involves developing immunity to the approval and disapproval of others. Most people remain trapped in cycles of weakness because they continue to seek validation from systems and individuals that benefit from their compliance. Breaking free requires cultivating what might be called strategic indifference, the ability to evaluate situations based on their actual consequences rather than their social acceptability. This strategic indifference does not mean becoming callous or cruel, but rather developing the emotional detachment necessary to make decisions based on effectiveness rather than sentiment. When faced with a choice between being liked and being respected, the transcendent individual consistently chooses respect. When confronted with the option of being safe or being strong, they choose strength. When presented with the alternative of being comfortable or being capable, they embrace capability. The development of strategic thinking represents another crucial element of transcendence. Most people approach problems with emotional reactions rather than analytical assessment. They make decisions based on how situations make them feel rather than what outcomes those decisions are likely to produce. Strategic thinking requires suppressing these emotional impulses long enough to conduct objective analysis of available options and their probable consequences. This analytical approach extends to the evaluation of relationships and social connections. The transcendent individual learns to categorize people based on their actual value rather than sentimental attachment. Some relationships provide mutual benefit and deserve investment. Others drain resources without providing comparable returns and should be minimized or eliminated. Still others present opportunities for strategic advantage that should be cultivated regardless of personal feelings. The mastery of persuasion and influence becomes essential as individuals begin to operate from positions of strength rather than supplication. Understanding human psychology allows for more effective communication and negotiation. Recognizing that most people are motivated by fear, greed, vanity, and the desire for validation enables the strategic deployment of these motivations to achieve desired outcomes. This psychological sophistication must be coupled with the development of tangible skills and resources. Strength without capability is mere posturing, while capability without strength is often ineffective. The transcendent individual systematically develops expertise in areas that provide leverage and autonomy. This might include technical skills that are difficult to replace, financial resources that provide independence, social connections that offer opportunities, or knowledge that grants competitive advantages. The cultivation of reputation represents another critical component of the transcendence process. Reputation is a form of social currency that can be leveraged to achieve objectives more efficiently than direct action. A reputation for competence attracts opportunities. A reputation for reliability builds trust that can be monetized. A reputation for strength deters challengers and predators. Most importantly, a reputation for following through on commitments creates the credibility necessary for effective leadership. Building reputation requires consistent demonstration of capabilities over time. Words without actions are meaningless, while actions without communication often go unnoticed. The transcendent individual learns to balance doing excellent work with ensuring that excellence is recognized and remembered by relevant audiences. This is not shameless self-promotion but rather strategic positioning for future opportunities. The management of information becomes crucial as individuals develop strength and influence. Most people share information carelessly, undermining their own strategic positions. The transcendent individual learns to control the flow of information, sharing details that advance their objectives while withholding information that could be used against them. This includes understanding when to reveal capabilities and when to conceal them, when to appear strong and when strategic vulnerability might be more effective. This information management extends to the careful cultivation of image and presentation. Appearance matters because humans make judgments based on visual cues and first impressions. The transcendent individual invests in presentation not out of vanity but as a tool for achieving objectives more efficiently. This includes everything from physical appearance and clothing to body language and communication style. The development of multiple income streams and resource bases provides the economic foundation necessary for true independence. Most people remain vulnerable to exploitation because they depend on single sources of income or support. The transcendent individual systematically builds redundancy into their resource base, ensuring that no single entity or system can exert complete control over their survival or prosperity. This economic independence must be complemented by emotional and psychological independence. Most people remain trapped because they cannot tolerate criticism, rejection, or conflict. The transcendent individual develops the emotional resilience necessary to pursue objectives even when others disapprove. This includes the ability to endure temporary setbacks, criticism, and social pressure without abandoning strategic goals. The mastery of timing becomes essential for maximizing the effectiveness of actions and decisions. Most people act impulsively based on immediate emotions or react defensively to external pressures. The transcendent individual learns to wait for optimal conditions before taking action, to recognize when patience serves better than urgency, and to understand how environmental factors affect the probability of success. This temporal sophistication includes understanding market cycles, political trends, social movements, and technological developments that create opportunities for those prepared to exploit them. The transcendent individual positions themselves to benefit from predictable changes rather than being victimized by them. The development of alliances and strategic partnerships multiplies individual capabilities while distributing risks. No one achieves significant objectives entirely alone, but most people approach relationships from positions of weakness rather than mutual benefit. The transcendent individual learns to identify individuals whose capabilities complement their own and to structure relationships that provide mutual advantage. These alliances must be based on clear understanding of mutual interests rather than sentiment or ideology. Effective partnerships require ongoing maintenance and adjustment as circumstances change. The transcendent individual learns to be a valuable ally while avoiding exploitation by those who would take advantage of generosity or loyalty. The cultivation of adaptability ensures continued effectiveness as conditions change. Most people develop strategies that work in specific circumstances and, then, continue applying those strategies even when conditions have shifted. The transcendent individual maintains cognitive flexibility, continuously evaluating the effectiveness of current approaches and adjusting tactics when necessary. This adaptability includes the willingness to abandon previous investments when they no longer serve strategic objectives. Most people fall victim to sunk cost fallacies, continuing ineffective behaviors because they have already invested time, money, or emotional energy. The transcendent individual cuts losses quickly and redirects resources toward more promising opportunities. The development of systematic thinking enables the transcendent individual to understand complex relationships between seemingly unrelated factors. Most people think linearly about cause and effect, missing the subtle interactions that often determine outcomes. Systems thinking reveals leverage points where small actions can produce disproportionate results. This systematic perspective includes understanding how personal actions affect broader networks and how changes in larger systems create opportunities or threats at the individual level. The transcendent individual positions themselves to benefit from system dynamics rather than being victimized by forces they don't understand. Part 3: The implementation of Merciless strategy. The final transformation from theoretical understanding to practical implementation requires embracing what Machiavelli understood as the ultimate requirement for effectiveness: the willingness to be merciless when circumstances demand it. This mercilessness is not cruelty for its own sake, but rather the strategic deployment of force, pressure, and decisiveness to achieve objectives that cannot be accomplished through gentler means. The implementation phase begins with the recognition that most significant achievements require actions that others will criticize, resent, or actively oppose. Innovation threatens established interests. Success challenges the assumptions of those who have failed. Leadership requires making decisions that benefit the whole while potentially harming specific individuals or groups. The transcendent individual accepts these realities and proceeds based on strategic calculation rather than the desire for universal approval. This strategic ruthlessness manifests in multiple dimensions of action and decision-making. In professional environments, it means pursuing opportunities aggressively rather than waiting for permission or invitation. It means negotiating from positions of strength rather than hoping for generosity from those who control resources. It means building capabilities that make one difficult to replace while positioning potential competitors for elimination or subordination. The merciless strategist understands that markets, whether economic, political, or social, operate according to competitive dynamics rather than moral principles. Success requires not only performing excellently but also ensuring that competitors perform less excellently. This might involve recruiting their best talent, undercutting their pricing strategies, developing superior alternatives to their products, or positioning oneself more effectively for emerging opportunities. In interpersonal relationships, strategic mercilessness requires setting and enforcing boundaries that others will inevitably test. Most people avoid conflict even when maintaining peace requires accepting unacceptable behavior from others. The merciless strategist addresses problems directly and decisively, imposing consequences for behavior that undermines their objectives or well-being. This boundary enforcement often requires ending relationships that have become parasitic or destructive. Most people continue investing in relationships long after they have become net negative because ending them feels cruel or because they hope circumstances will improve. The merciless strategist cuts these losses quickly and redirects emotional and practical resources toward more productive connections. The implementation of merciless strategy also requires developing comfort with using leverage when it becomes available. Leverage might come from possessing skills others need, controlling resources others want, holding information others prefer to keep secret, or maintaining relationships others desire access to. Most people avoid using leverage because it feels manipulative, but the merciless strategist recognizes that unused leverage eventually becomes worthless. This utilization of leverage must be calibrated carefully to avoid creating unnecessary enemies while maximizing strategic advantage. The goal is not to abuse power but to convert temporary advantages into permanent improvements in one's strategic position. This might involve negotiating better terms for ongoing relationships, securing commitments that provide future security, or positioning oneself for even greater leverage as circumstances evolve. The management of reputation during this implementation phase requires sophisticated understanding of how different audiences perceive various types of behavior. What appears merciless to competitors might appear decisive to supporters. What seems ruthless to those being displaced might seem necessary to those who benefit from the change. The merciless strategist learns to manage these multiple perceptions simultaneously, maintaining necessary relationships while pursuing strategic objectives. This reputation management includes controlling narratives about one's actions and motivations. Most people allow others to define the meaning of their behavior, often accepting characterizations that undermine their strategic positions. The merciless strategist actively shapes how their actions are interpreted, emphasizing aspects that support their objectives while minimizing aspects that might create unnecessary resistance. The timing of merciless actions requires exceptional judgment and patience. Acting too early wastes the element of surprise and allows targets to prepare defenses. Acting too late allows opportunities to pass and competitors to establish stronger positions. The merciless strategist develops intuitive understanding of optimal timing, striking when conditions maximize the probability of success while minimizing the risk of effective retaliation. This temporal sophistication includes understanding how to sequence multiple actions for maximum cumulative effect. Complex objectives often require coordinated campaigns rather than single decisive actions. The merciless strategist plans these sequences carefully, ensuring that early actions position them advantageously for subsequent moves while avoiding commitments that might limit future options. The allocation of resources during implementation requires disciplined focus on activities that directly advance strategic objectives. Most people dissipate their energy across too many simultaneous pursuits, achieving mediocre results in multiple areas rather than excellent results in crucial areas. The merciless strategist concentrates resources ruthlessly, accepting short-term limitations in order to achieve dominant positions in selected domains. This resource concentration often requires abandoning activities that feel important but don't contribute meaningfully to strategic goals. Most people continue comfortable routines and pleasant activities even when those activities prevent them from pursuing more significant opportunities. The merciless strategist eliminates these distractions without sentiment, redirecting time and energy toward activities that compound strategic advantages. The development of systematic approaches to problem solving enables consistent effectiveness across diverse challenges. Most people approach each problem as a unique situation requiring creative solutions. While creativity has its place, the merciless strategist recognizes that most problems fall into predictable categories that can be addressed using proven methodologies. These systematic approaches include frameworks for analyzing competitive situations, templates for negotiating favorable agreements, checklists for evaluating potential partnerships, and protocols for managing crisis situations. Having these systems in place allows for faster, more consistent decision-making while reducing the emotional stress that often accompanies complex challenges. The cultivation of psychological resilience becomes essential as implementation of merciless strategy inevitably generates resistance, criticism, and attempts at retaliation. Most people abandon effective strategies when others express disapproval or when short-term consequences feel uncomfortable. The merciless strategist develops emotional tolerance for negative feedback, understanding that effectiveness often requires enduring temporary unpopularity. This psychological preparation includes developing coping mechanisms for stress, maintaining perspective during setbacks, and preserving motivation when progress feels slow. The merciless strategist understands that significant achievements require sustained effort over extended periods, often through circumstances that would discourage less committed individuals. The establishment of feedback mechanisms ensures that strategies remain effective as conditions change. Most people continue implementing approaches long after they have become obsolete because they lack systematic ways to evaluate results. The merciless strategist builds measurement systems that provide objective data about the effectiveness of current tactics and early warning signals when adjustments become necessary. These feedback systems include both quantitative metrics and qualitative indicators. Quantitative measures might include financial performance, market share, productivity metrics, or relationship quality scores. Qualitative indicators might include changes in how others respond to one's presence, shifts in the types of opportunities being offered, or modifications in the behavior of competitors and allies. The development of succession planning ensures that strategic advantages survive beyond individual implementation. Most people build strategies around their personal capabilities and relationships without considering how those advantages might be preserved or transferred. The merciless strategist creates systems and structures that continue functioning effectively even when their direct involvement decreases. This institutional thinking includes documenting successful approaches, training others to implement proven strategies, building organizational capabilities that complement individual strengths, and establishing cultures that reward behaviors aligned with strategic objectives. The ultimate expression of merciless strategy is creating systems that continue advancing one's interests with minimal ongoing intervention. The transcendent individual who successfully implements these principles emerges as a force that reshapes their environment rather than being shaped by it. They become the type of person who creates opportunities rather than waiting for them, who builds systems rather than being processed by them, and who influences outcomes rather than accepting whatever circumstances provide. This transformation represents the fulfillment of human potential that most people never approach because they remain trapped in patterns of thinking and behavior that prioritize comfort over capability, approval over achievement, and safety over significance. The merciless strategist chooses the more difficult path that leads to genuine freedom, authentic power, and meaningful impact. The world indeed craves weakness and compliance because these qualities make human beings easier to control and exploit. But, for those who understand this dynamic and possess the courage to transcend it, extraordinary possibilities await. The choice is stark but clear: remain a victim of systems designed to harvest human potential, or become an architect of systems that serve human flourishing. The legacy of Machiavelli's insights extends far beyond the political realm where they originated. In every domain of human activity, the principles of strategic thinking, tactical flexibility, and measured ruthlessness provide pathways to achievement that conventional approaches cannot match. Those who master these principles discover that the world's appetite for their weakness transforms into respect for their strength, and society's demand for their compliance becomes recognition of their leadership. The transformation is complete when the individual no longer seeks permission to pursue their objectives, no longer apologizes for their success, and no longer compromises their vision to accommodate the limitations of others. They have become what the world needs but rarely produces: a human being operating at full capacity, contributing maximum value, and inspiring others to attempt their own transcendence from the comfortable chains of socially acceptable mediocrity. This is the ultimate gift that merciless strategy provides: not just personal success, but the demonstration that alternative approaches to life are possible and that human potential extends far beyond what most people ever imagine. In a world that profits from human weakness, becoming strong is both a personal achievement and a revolutionary act.